lesson because the next lesson is a little bit longer and also a little more important. And so we're going to, I didn't want to combine those two topics. So we'll do this one quickly today, and then we'll focus on the next one save it for the next time, inshallah. So the Shaykh, he continues in this chapter on the ideal Muslim and his community and his society, and he mentions that the Muslim, the ideal Muslim, and we alluded to this maybe a few weeks or months ago, that the ideal Muslim, he strives to reconcile among the Muslims. He tries to reconcile between the Muslims. So two brothers, two sisters who might be fighting, have a disagreement, and he says part of being concerned about the Muslims' welfare, and you know, we talked about this last time, that you know, when you look at the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and you see that you know, there's you know, we learn about removing a harm, you know, whether from the road or from somewhere, and you know, you can talk about the removing of that harm, but the bigger picture, right, is really you caring about your brother or your sister in Islam. Right? It's not so much, you know, it's the expression in English, they say you lose the forest for the trees. Right? What does that expression mean? You guys know? What does that mean? No? You guys never heard of that expression? Okay, maybe. Exactly. You focus on the small things that don't matter. You know, if you looked at a beautiful forest, right? You say, oh, mashallah, look, you know, the leaves are falling and there's so much foliage, so many different colors, right? And you say, oh, look at that one tree is crooked. Right? You lose the big picture. You're focusing, oh, that one tree, it doesn't have enough leaves. But you forget the beauty of the entire forest, right? So you're missing the big picture is the message of that saying. So, you know, when you start to look at these things from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, especially as it relates to character, and you start focusing, you're like, oh, you know, what is it? What's special about the twig or the branch that's in the way that's blocking people? There's nothing special about that. It's your concern that someone's going to get hurt. You're concerned that this is, you know, I do one small action, this is going to yield in something much bigger for somebody else, right? Somebody else is going to be protected. And so continuing with that theme is the Muslim trying to or striving to reconcile among the Muslims, amongst their brothers and sisters. And he says part of being concerned about the Muslims' welfare and protecting them from harm involves striving to reconcile among them if there is a dispute. And he mentions the ayah from the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, if two parties among the believers fall into a disagreement, into a quarrel, make peace between them. But if one of them transgresses beyond bounds against the other, then fight against the one that transgresses until it complies. And then make peace between them with justice and be fair, for Allah loves those who are fair. And then the Shaykh, he says that the Prophet ﷺ himself used to strive to reconcile among the conflicting parties, regardless of how busy he was. This is the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, you know, running an ummah, getting the message and giving the message. Yet he found time to reconcile between people, and he mentions one of the narrations in a lengthy hadith, which is authentic, and in which it is mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he heard that there was some dispute among the members of Banu Amr, and so he went out with some people and he began to talk to them, and he talked to them for a long time. In other words, it says he talked to them until the time of the next prayer came. In other words, he talked to them for a very long time. And then the Shaykh, he says that the Prophet used to permit saying many things that people tend to add in the hope of bringing disputes to an end. So in other words, he's saying that if you find two people, you know, they're fighting, you can you know, like what they say call white lies. You give them, you can say something to them that will bring them closer. So you say, you know, brother Ahmed and brother Muhammad are fighting, and you go to Ahmed and he says, look, man, I just talked to Muhammad. Muhammad said he's really sorry. You know, he might not say it to you, but you know, he's really sorry about what happened. And you know, and then you go to Muhammad and you say, look, you know, I spoke to brother Ahmed. You know, he's really sorry about what happened. You know, maybe he's not going to say it to you, but you know, he said, you know, so you know, try to reconcile between people. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said this kind of lie, or or half truth or something like that, is one of those things that it is acceptable. And he says, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in a Sahih Hadith, he said, he is not a liar who reconciles among people by telling them good news or saying something good. So telling them something good, something to encourage them to come together and things of that sort. And this narration, Kulthum, who's the narrator, she says, I did not hear him permit anything of what people might say except in 3 cases. In other words, he did not permit lying or the talking about people or saying things except in 3 cases. Those cases being war, in times of war, right? When you might be able to lie and to deceive your enemy, reconciling among people, which is the topic of today, and then the speech between a man and his wife. Okay, so if she says, am I the most beautiful woman in the world? And you have to say, you have to be faster, brothers. Come on, that took too long. that can get you into trouble. So you have to say yes. No, don't be shy, right? No hesitation. So it doesn't matter what the true answer is. The answer is always yes. Okay. So he says in those 3 circumstances, the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed for this kind of speech. So with that, inshallah, we conclude. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. Jazakumullahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.